Welcome everyone there. I can see there's a few different words coming in there in relation to biodiversity. And I guess just this morning, we just want us all to be thinking about biodiversity and thinking about nature as we go through this workshop. So I am going to share my screen now, and we can chat back about the word cloud then later on. So feel free to keep putting in the different words that you're thinking of. So just sharing the screen, and Isel, is that sharing?
Yeah.
Brilliant, great. Okay, so welcome everyone today. So my name is Emer Ní Dhúill, and I'm with Business for Biodiversity Ireland. And I'm delighted to have my colleagues Isel Sheehy and Fiona Smith with me today as well. And we're also delighted to have Cillian McMahon from Business in the Community Ireland and Sarah Kelly from the National Biodiversity Data Centre, who are supporters of ours as well. So basically today, we want to welcome everyone to the Discovery Track. And what we're trying to do today, or we're going to do, is talk about this nature journey and how we start with our nature positive journey. So just a couple, sorry, my slides are just gone a little bit slow there, sorry. So just a couple of housekeeping bits at the moment. So Isel just already mentioned that this is going to be recorded, so we will have this available in our webinars resource on our website, so you can go back and look at it later. Also, we have a Q&A function set up, so if you have any questions, just put them in the Q&A. If we have time today, we'll be able to answer them if they aren't answered throughout the presentation. If we don't have time today to answer them, we will get back to you. So feel free to put in any of those burning questions. Also, just to kind of state from the beginning what the platform is and what it isn't. So what we're about offering and working around mainstreaming biodiversity concepts. We're about knowledge sharing and active learning. We work together with different businesses for peer-to-peer learning. We deliver training and help build capacity, and also guidance on best practice development for different sectors. And we're also about advocating for an enabling policy environment for businesses. And we are not all things sustainability. We're not a government top-down initiative for passive learning, and we're not a marketplace for sustainability or biodiversity solutions. So basically what we want to do today is, first of all, obviously welcome everyone that's after joining our Discovery Track. And we want to introduce you to Business for Biodiversity Ireland. Going to talk about the language and terminology around nature, which can be a bit confusing. Going to briefly talk about the policy landscape, and then talk about how nature matters to your business. And with that, obviously getting buy-in from decision makers within your organisation. Cillian is going to have a chat to us as well about the relationship between biodiversity loss and climate change, and we are also going to introduce the ACT-D framework, and I will also go briefly through our Nature Accelerator Programme as well. So first of all, who are Business for Biodiversity Ireland? Well, we were formed out of an action and an objective of the third National Biodiversity Action Plan. And we were funded for the first 3 years from 2021 to 2024 by the Department of Housing, Local Government and Heritage and the Department of Agriculture, Food and the Marine. And then after the 3 years, we've spun out as a social enterprise, and we are funded in part by the National Parks and Wildlife Services through the Department of Local Government, Housing, Local Government and Heritage. We have been supported from the beginning by Natural Capital Ireland, Business in the Community Ireland and the National Biodiversity Data Centre. And in fact, we started out as a project with Natural Capital Ireland to develop this platform and have since spun out. And during our years of developing the platform, we have been collaborating with Business for Nature and also the European Business and Biodiversity platforms. So there's a number of other biodiversity platforms around Europe that we link in with as well. So we're all kind of on this learning journey. And I guess just a reminder of why we are all here today and what it's all about. So obviously we all are well aware that we are in absolute crisis. Our biodiversity crisis is really severe. Our government had declared a biodiversity and climate emergency in 2019, and it certainly doesn't feel like it's been treated like an emergency. And we're seeing the impacts here in Ireland, as well as what we're hearing from abroad as well, due to nature loss and climate change. So into the platform, we have a mission to empower every business to incorporate nature into decision making. It's about getting businesses to assess their impacts and dependencies on nature, and also looking at their risks and opportunities as well. And we also aim to support the implementation of the 4th National Biodiversity Action Plan, of which the platform has a number of actions dedicated to BFBI. So when we started out, we had started out with a number of businesses. So you can see on the screen here, these would have been our first community of practice businesses. And most of these are now in our strategy track. And they've kind of come along the journey with us all the way. So again, we have all been learning from each other. You can see from this, we have like energy, academia, finance, landscaping, construction, transport, services. So we have a really good diversity of businesses that we started working with initially. So you guys here today are at the discovery track stage. So this is about the guidance on how to get started on this path to nature positive. And the following tracks are your action, strategy and evolution tracks that I will talk about later on in the presentation. So I guess one of the key things I kind of want people to do is to, when I'm talking all about this, assessing impacts and dependencies on nature, to be thinking not just about your direct operations, but your whole value chain, because that's where a lot of the impacts and dependencies are. So this is just a very high level example of a direct operations and value chain. So this is for the built environment. So you can see where the direct operations are there. And upstream of that, that's where all the material extraction and production is happening. And then downstream of that, you have your operations and maintenance and demolition and waste. But it's everything along that value chain that you need to be looking at, not just your own direct operations. And similarly, just another example there for the agri-food. So there's upstream inputs like all the seed, machinery, all the things you need to be able to produce your goods. And then your downstream, you can see there like your distribution, processing, all of these things that you rely on for you to be able to operate your business. And it's similar for the services sector as well, although often there is a bit more difficulty for those businesses to make that link, but we can talk about that later. So through our work with our different businesses, what keeps coming up is this issue around language, definitions and acronyms. And there are so many acronyms out there at the moment. It is overwhelming, not just for people working in the sustainability field, but for anyone trying to get their head around everything that's happening here with nature and reporting on nature and on biodiversity. So I'm not going to go through all of these, but I'm just going to go through some of them. So I think the key question, obviously, what is biodiversity? So when we talk about biodiversity, we're talking about all living things in nature. And the level of biodiversity can be a good indicator of the health of nature in a particular place or ecosystem. So if you've got really low biodiversity, it's likely the ecosystem isn't in great health either. And when we're talking about the ecosystems, we're talking about communities here. So it'd be a dynamic complex of plants, animals, and microorganisms and their non-living environment and how they interact together as a functioning unit. And then nature. So between nature and biodiversity, they're often conflated, but nature in its broadest sense is the natural, physical and material world. And it's often used to describe wildlife and geology. But good way to think of it. Basically, includes the living and the non-living parts of ecosystems, and we're part of nature as well. And it's important that we remember we're all part of it too. Another term that comes up as well is natural capital, and this is really a metaphor for nature, and just kind of using the language of economics to explain the importance of nature and our natural resources. So it's looking at, say, your stocks, which is, say, your ecosystems. So that could be a peatland, a wetland, a woodland, a marine area, and it's looking at these as your stocks, and there's ecosystem services that flow from these. So these are the benefits that we get from nature. And when we're looking at natural capital, we are looking at what we're getting from nature, but it's really important, obviously, that nature has its intrinsic value regardless of us as well. And the benefits that we get would include things like, say, provisioning services, so our food, our timbers, medicines. It would include climate regulation, flood regulation, pollination. There's loads of things we depend on from healthy ecosystems, and including the cultural side as well. There's a huge importance in that spirituality or health and well-being that we associate with nature as well. Another term, and it's in the title of our talk, is nature positive. So what is nature positive? What does it mean? So nature positive is a global goal, and the goal is to halt biodiversity loss and at a baseline from 2020. By 2030, it's going to be recovered to that 2020 baseline, and from then on, it is going to continue to recover. So you can see in this infographic, I think it's a really nice infographic and easily understood. But you can see there, even at 2020, the biodiversity levels weren't great anyway. So we're trying to get back to that point and then to continue to recover. So basically, more simply put, there's going to be more nature in the world in 2030 than there was in 2020, and it's going to continue to recover after that. And then when we talk about a nature positive economy, so this is a nice infographic here, and it just gets us thinking. If you look there with the natural capital, so our natural resources that are extracted and money is made from it through our primary sector, it then goes to the secondary sector, a lot of manufacturing, and then down to our tertiary sector, which includes our banks and finances. So there's money all the way along there. But a lot of it just ends up sitting in banks, sitting in finance, and not going back into nature. So when we're not putting money back into nature restoration and nature recovery, we're not going to be able to continue to extract, because there'll be nothing there for us to take. So it's getting that understanding that we need to take care of nature in order for our businesses and our lives to operate well. So there is a good definition from Business for Nature in terms of the nature positive economy. So it says that actions and activities that reduce the negative impacts of biodiversity across their value chains and redirect financial investments towards activities to restore and protect nature. And that's what needs to be happening. And I think when you make the link between your business and between nature, it makes sense. It makes business sense. There is a lot of policy out there. So we have our global policies and goals, so our sustainable development goals. We also have the global biodiversity framework, and again, the nature positive initiative as well. On the European level, there is a lot of policy out there in relation to biodiversity, in particular the EU Green Deal, and within that you have the EU Biodiversity Strategy, you have the Nature Restoration Law, and you have the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive. So that's just a few of what's there, but these are some of the key ones to think about. And on the national level, we have our National Biodiversity Action Plan, which I've mentioned at the beginning. We have the Green Procurement Strategy. We have our National Planning Framework, our Climate Action, and Food Vision 2030. And also, Ireland is currently developing their national restoration plans as part of the Nature Restoration Law. So there is a lot going on in this field at the moment. I had mentioned there some of the acronyms, and there is an awful lot of them, but the CSRD, the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, is what got a lot of businesses to really sit up and take note, because it was bringing around this mandatory reporting. There has been a lot of talk about CSRD recently, and we kind of are waiting to hear what's happening with it. But basically, it is about businesses assessing their impacts and dependencies on nature and reporting on it as well. And with the CSRD come resources to help businesses to report. So you have different standards that have been developed specifically for reporting. And there are also really good tools out there and guidances that are step by step to help businesses to understand their impacts and dependencies on nature. So I guess it's bringing it back again to biodiversity. And one of the things that I'd always do when I'm thinking about the impacts and dependencies on nature is what is driving biodiversity loss, and always keeping them at the fore of your mind, just to be thinking about what your business does and how your business is impacting and driving biodiversity loss. So the 5 key drivers of biodiversity loss are land use and land use change. So that's the ecosystem conversion. Pollution is another one. Overexploitation of natural resources, invasive species, and of course climate change, which Cillian will chat about later. And it's really important to make that link in terms of climate change and biodiversity loss, that they are 2 sides of the one coin, and actions for biodiversity will help mitigate against some of the impacts of climate change. And just to throw out a few statistics, on the global context, almost 40% of the Earth's plant species are threatened with extinction. And globally, wildlife populations have declined by 69% since the 1970s, which is very worrying. And then when we look at the Irish context, so of the 31,500 species identified in Ireland, only 10 have been assessed for conservation status. A fifth of these species are considered to be at risk of extinction, and 85% of our EU protected habitats have an unfavourable conservation status. So again, that's pretty stark and pretty worrying. Another graphic, I think this is a very good graph here. This was within one of our recent reports on the economics of biodiversity, and developed by. So you can see on this graph, it is monitoring from 1992 to 2013, the change in as our produced capital. You can see there, it's all the stuff that we buy, that we use, all that stuff, as it continues to rise. If you look to the bottom part of the graph, you can see that natural capital, our natural resources, is declining as our produced capital is increasing, and that's just completely unsustainable. That produced capital line cannot continue to increase without nature, basically. So again, it's bringing it back to that idea of sustainability, and we need to work within the limits of our planetary boundaries. And basically, as it says here, there's no business on a dead planet. And again, to bring it back to some more reports that came out. So the World Economic Forum, they produce a global risks report every year. And for the last number of years, biodiversity loss and ecosystem services are always in the top 5 of risks over the next 10 years. So you can see from this latest one, 2025, biodiversity loss and ecosystem collapse are ranked second most at risk, second greatest risk to economies over the next 10 years. So that's very worrying. And again, it's just letting us know that we need to be taking action now. We just seem to be getting report after report, but the action needs to be happening. I mentioned that report there about the biodiversity of economics, the Dasgupta review. There's some abridged version of it that's very interesting to read. But basically within that, it's looking at how the economy is embedded in nature, and completely and utterly dependent on nature and not external to it. So without nature, there is no economy. So I guess then it kind of comes to that question around you yourself as an individual may care a lot about nature and biodiversity loss, but why should businesses care about nature and nature loss? So as you can see from what I've been chatting about earlier, nature, it matters for businesses. So it is the backbone of the global economy. So all businesses, regardless of their size or sector, depend on nature to some extent, and society can't survive or thrive without a functioning, healthy, natural world. So when I talked about some of the acronyms, DEROS is one of the acronyms. So that stands for dependencies, impacts, risks, and opportunities. And these are the three key headings that businesses need to address, to look at in order to assess their impacts and dependencies on nature. So when they're looking at the dependencies, businesses depend on the healthy ecosystems and the stocks and services they provide. So again, it's not just your direct operations, it's upstream and downstream as well, where you are directly or indirectly having impacts and depend on nature. In terms of impacts, industry drives and is impacted by nature loss. There are a lot of risks to businesses around nature loss as well, and can significantly impact businesses. But there's also opportunities for forward-thinking businesses to engage more with nature. So basically, reiterating that every business impacts and depends on nature and may experience risks and opportunities associated with those impacts and dependencies. But the key message is that you need to understand where your dependencies lie and your impacts lie within your business. And it's just, again, makes business sense to understand what potential risks there are there. So there's a lot in this particular slide here, but basically it's really just showing how nature is in crisis, but that this crisis is creating physical risks to businesses. So I had mentioned, excuse me, the impacts, dependencies and risks. So if we look at dependencies, there's a few statistics here as well that again are pretty stark. So the whole economy ultimately depends on nature and its services, with half of the world's GDP moderately or highly dependent on nature. So that's around 58 trillion of GDP that's moderately or highly dependent on nature. When we look at the impacts, this is another kind of statistic in relation to how businesses contribute to nature loss. So our reliance on food, energy, infrastructure, and fashion are behind more than 90% of man-made pressures on nature. That's really shocking. And basically, that's because we're extracting so many resources and not replenishing nature. So we are extracting at 1.75 times faster than nature can actually replenish. So again, it's not sustainable. Those kind of impacts are going to impact not just nature, but businesses and us as individuals as well. And when we look at the risks, we can look at the global economy. So ecosystem degradation could lead to global GDP losses of up to 2.7 trillion annually in 2030. So when we're looking at these physical risks, I mean, they would include, say, for your direct operations, it could be access to water for cooling, it could be an impact on your land or your buildings or assets that you may have due to floods, fires, extreme weather events, and also impacts to physical risks to your value chain. So that could include resource availability and your yield as well. So again, these are things that we really need to be thinking about as businesses. One of the other statistics as well that's very worrying is that up to 577 billion in annual global crop production is at risk from pollinator loss. And that is a huge issue for so many sectors, especially the food sector. So, and for us then as individuals that are relying on this for our own kind of health and well-being and survival. So again, it's just really continuing to link back where nature is interfacing with your business. So in terms of some other risks, so I'd mentioned kind of the supply of raw materials can be a big risk, but there's also brand reputation as well. Like there is expectation. Customers expect their businesses to be sustainable and to be operating sustainably. There's also financial risks. So there has been unprecedented demand for green investments, and the value of sustainable and ethical investments has quadrupled since 2010. There's also insurance risk as well. So the insurance industry itself is well aware of the risks to, the risks from nature loss and how it's impacting them. 2020 was a record year for them for natural disasters in terms of the amount of claims they had to pay out, 83 billion. There's also loading of premiums as well because of environmental risks. And we've seen, like not just abroad, but here in Ireland over the last number of years, the serious flooding and issues, especially down in Cork, how businesses, all local businesses, seriously impacted, the infrastructure impacted, even with the recent storm that we had, the way our energy system was so badly impacted, and there was a reliance on getting generators in from abroad to be able to bring energy to people. So these are huge, huge risks. There's also the regulatory risk as well. So we have to be looking at working towards implementing the National Biodiversity Action Plan. There's also the EU Restoration Law and the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, and of course the EU Deforestation Regulation, to name but a few. So again, it's keeping all of this in mind, because these are things that will really impact on your business. And if you take action now, this is going to be a benefit to your business as well. But again, it's understanding where your biggest risks are along your value chain and your direct operations. So when we look at the opportunities that are there, so customer loyalty is really important. You have your first mover's advantage for taking action, and also there is cost savings around taking action for nature. So that would include when you're streamlining your supply chain and limiting waste as well. There's also the opportunities for building relationships with stakeholders by acting transparently and building relationships and partnerships with communities and NGOs as well. And this was an interesting one, the talent acquisition. So by 2030, 50% of the workforce are going to be millennials and Gen Zs. And 65% of millennials want to work with a company that has a strong environmental agenda. So that was from a report by PwC in 2019. But again, there is a lot, and also opportunities in terms of how you can act for nature as well. I am going to turn you over now to Cillian. So Cillian is with Business in the Community Ireland, and he is going to have a chat to us today just about the links between climate and nature and the work they do at Business in the Community. So do you want to fire ahead, Cillian?
Yeah,
thank you.
Thanks very much, Emer. Hello there. My name is Cillian McMahon, and I'm a Senior Sustainability Advisor with Business in the Community Ireland. For those of you who are not familiar with Business Community Ireland, we are the leaders in sustainability and social inclusion. We're celebrating our 25th anniversary this year, and we are a network of over 100 of Ireland's leading companies, and we believe in the power of the collective in bringing companies together to tackle both the environmental and social challenges which Irish businesses face. Building on what Emer says, I'm going to talk about the linkages between climate and nature. So over the past number of years, it's fair to say that there's been a big uptick in our understanding of the climate crisis, which has kickstarted action by business. We still have a long way to go, but the key drivers include the Paris Agreement, the National Climate Action Plan, the increasing scientific evidence. You probably would have seen the recent report from the World Meteorological Association, which confirms that 2024 was the warmest year on record, and about 1.55 degrees above pre-industrial level. However, similar to what Emer said, the climate crisis is also having opportunities. We're major advancements in renewables, clean technologies, but also the benefits from adapting and being prepared for the impacts of climate change. There are two fundamental sort of links between climate and nature, and climate change negatively impacts many of the world's species and ecosystems, driving biodiversity loss. At the same time, protecting and restoring biodiversity is crucial to addressing climate change. So first, looking at the impacts, the changing weather patterns associated with climate change will have a catastrophic impact on biodiversity. As Emer mentioned, climate change is one of the main drivers of biodiversity loss. Climate change is already having a damaging effect on ecosystems in which ways are harmful to biodiversity and dangerous to people. Human-induced climate disruption due to the extraction and burning of fossil fuels is heating up the world's atmosphere beyond stable limits, which within the planet and humans have evolved and thrived. Global warming contributes to species becoming extinct, but is also forcing them to invasive species to migrate further north and into towns and cities because they've nowhere else to go. At the same time, on the other hand, nature provides a wealth of benefits like human development, equality, economic value, and security. It also increases our resilience to climate change. Nature is particularly critical for stabilizing our climate, with over 50% of all greenhouse gas emissions absorbed by marine and land ecosystems. Forests, wetlands, peatlands, grasslands are all examples of major carbon sinks. In urban areas, for example, trees, living walls can act as shade during heat and can cool down buildings, and healthy soils can absorb water, prevent and reduce the effects of flooding. Nature is very important to help us to both adapt and mitigate the effects of climate change. However, it's very important to note, while there are key linkages, to a certain extent, we can engineer the climate crisis with renewable energy, innovation, and carbon reduction. But in terms of biodiversity loss, once a species is gone, you can't bring it back. Also to note that nature is much more subtle, complex, multifaceted. The metrics are not as clear. There's no scope 1, 2, and 3 equivalent in nature. And this has kind of delayed awareness and action until now. Nature-based solutions will be helpful in helping us to mitigate and adapt to the effects of climate change, but we can't offset our way out of either crisis. There's not enough nature-based solutions in the world to offset all our emissions. The credibility of a lot of the offsetting schemes we brought into disrepute. Using land alone to remove the world's carbon emissions to achieve net zero by 2050 would require at least 1.6 billion hectares of new forests. It's about 5 times the size of India. I know a lot of companies are setting science-based targets, but the science-based targets initiative, they'll only accept the last 10% residual emissions using carbon removals and storage. There's still a long way to go in terms of the technology for carbon capture and storage, and it's currently a big consumer of energy. So it's very important that businesses design and adapt their transition plans to be both net zero and nature positive at the same time, because they must go hand in hand. And speaking of climate transition plans, I'd like to talk now a bit about our Accelerate Pact. So those of you who know business in the Community of Ireland, one of our big campaigns was the Low Carbon Pledge, which we launched in 2018. The aim of the Low Carbon Pledge was for get the CEO of a company to set get their company to set a science-based target by 2024. We concluded it last year with 62 signatories. The pledge was very successful, driving action. It was mentioned in the government's climate action plan. It was a very good collective campaign. It was very instrumental in getting companies to get started with measuring, reporting, taking action on climate. But the time has moved on. We need to raise the bar, and we need to, as Emer said, we need to focus on action. Targets are great, but we need to focus on action. So at the end of last year, building on the success of the Low Carbon Pledge, we launched Accelerate, the Business Pact for Climate and Nature. So the Low Carbon Pledge was primarily focused on climate and greenhouse gas emissions and setting science-based targets. We've widened the scope to include nature. As you can see from my earlier slides, we really want to hammer home the point that climate and nature should not be looked at in isolation. So in terms of the asks of Accelerate, we're asking signatories to develop a comprehensive climate transition plan, but also to set a net zero by 2050 target where possible, and to do so by 2030, if not earlier. So those of you who might not be familiar with climate transition plans, it's a comprehensive strategy that goes beyond decarbonization and outlines how an entity will adapt its business model, operations, mitigate risk, engage stakeholders, and align with net zero. Whether we really feel that targets are great, but a transition plan is a very good tool to help companies take action. So how will it work? We want to develop a centre of excellence on climate transition plans for Irish business, offering guidance and fostering collaboration through a community of practice. We will publish an annual climate precision plan. We want to benchmark the quality of companies' climate precision plans, and we will look at the leverage areas, including nature, scope 3, just transition, targets, decarbonisation, finance, governance, risk, and advocacy. We will provide resources on each of these areas. So obviously, the Business and Community Ireland, we will partner. We believe there's enough work to go around. We will partner with Business for Biodiversity Ireland as part of the Accelerate Pact, but also work closely with the All Ireland Pollinator Plan and the National Biodiversity Data Centre. So a bit of homework for you. Just look at your own climate strategy and see how it interfaces with nature, and where are the synergies and trade-offs that may exist. So thank you very much. And back to you, Emer.
Gabriela Mahagat, Cillian, thanks a million for that. Yeah, thank you so much. So basically, I am now just going to introduce you to the ACT-D. So with the Discovery Track, we are trying to get people to businesses to just where to start on their nature positive journey. So the ACT-D framework, it's high level actions for nature, and ACT-D stands for to assess, commit, transform, and disclose. So you can't develop actions or targets without understanding where impacts and dependencies are happening. So the assessment piece is hugely important, and it is the first step that needs to be taken. So when you're carrying out an assessment, it's about measuring, valuing, and prioritizing your impacts and dependencies on nature, so that you know that you are operating and acting on the most material ones. So the ones that have the greatest impact, or that you have the greatest dependency on. So the ACT-D framework was developed by a number of environmental organizations and businesses. So it includes Business for Nature, Capitals Coalition, the Science Based Targets for Nature, the TNFD, the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, and more. And again, this was a big collaboration to basically align how we are reporting on nature and how we are understanding it. So it kind of brings more consistency and comparability as well, if we're all speaking the same language and kind of following the same structure. So so when with the platform, I'll talk about it anyway in a few minutes, we do go through all of this as you move along the tracks. There's also a huge amount of resources available, and these can all be accessed through our website as well. Often it is really overwhelming, the amount of resources that are there, because you can't read everything. But I would suggest looking at the Business for Nature Strategy Handbook. So that's it's a pretty short document, but it gives a pretty concise kind of steps for you to start considering as you start your nature positive journey. You can see at the bottom there's a load of different really useful resources. I would say to take a look at the roadmap to nature positive. So I know we have quite a diversity of sectors here today, but the roadmap to nature positive have developed specific sector specific roadmaps, as well as the general foundation one. And again, there's really good resources there from the Task Force for Nature and related financial disclosure as well. So again, just maybe pick one or two to look at initially before you start delving into all of the resources, because there's a huge amount there. So I just mentioned there the sector specific roadmap. So far, the nature positive roadmaps have developed specific roadmaps for 14 sectors. So that includes the agri-food, it includes the built environment, forest products, energy. So these are really big impacting sectors, the mining as well, and cement and concrete. So definitely, if you're within any of those sectors that are here today, do take a look at that. And for others that maybe don't fall under those sectors at the moment, just take a look at the general roadmap to nature positive. And these sector specific guidances, they help you, they basically look at, for each sector, what are the main impacts for a particular sector on nature, and what are the main dependencies for a particular sector on nature, and the priority actions that those businesses should take. So again, it's high level and you want to bring it back to the Irish context and to your own business context as well, but it definitely is a really good starting point. So I guess I want to come back to the Business for Biodiversity Ireland's Nature Accelerator Programme, Nature Strategy Accelerator Programme. So you guys, as you know, are all on Discovery. And basically what we want to do is to integrate nature into decision making. We want to help businesses build resilient business models. So that's building up capacity within the business. And we want to help businesses comply with regulation, but also to deliver broader systemic value as well. So in terms of the next tracks, so the action track is the next track after Discovery. So the following tracks are fee paying. So if you are an organisation with less than 50 people, the cost is 1,800, and if you've more than 50 people, the cost is 5,000. Now, our membership fees are aligned with the green grants. So if it is something that you want to have a chat about, you can contact us and we can go through that with you, how you would apply for the green grants. In the action track, basically, people join the businesses that join the action track are ready to do their double materiality assessment. So that's where you look at the impacts that your business is having on nature, but also the impacts that nature loss will have on your business, including the financial impact as well. So that's why you're looking at both the financial and environmental impact. So that's why it's the double materiality. And again, that's like such an important step for you to understand what is most material to your business. And basically, we are helping business to assess their impacts and dependencies on nature and to look at the risks and opportunities as well. And the output of the action track is a double materiality assessment. So at the moment, we had our first action track in-person session there last month, which was brilliant. So just to let you know, some of the businesses that are in our action track at the moment, and again, you can see we have a good bit of transport in there, we've services as well, and we were partnered with Deloitte to deliver that particular workshop. So that has been really great. We also have an ecology firm in there. So there's a huge amount of learnings that we as BFBI get from these businesses, but also these businesses working together, peer-to-peer learning. We are all kind of on the same journey and things are changing quite rapidly. So it's great to be able to talk to the different businesses and for them to be able to build networks as well. When we look at the strategy track, so in order to join the strategy track, you have to have your double materiality assessment complete. And those in the strategy track, they are aiming to deliver a credible nature strategy. And that starts out with a nature ambition statement. So again, these are really active learning sessions that we have. So the action and strategy track are all in-person meetings, 3 in-person meetings a year. And they are really, really good learning. So we have found them really, really valuable. And the feedback from our businesses has been that they have also found them very valuable. The evolution track. So this is where we all want to get to. So in order to join the evolution track, you have to have a credible nature strategy. And again, with the evolution track, this is around developing the implementation plan and how you're going to measure and monitor the actions that you are going to implement based on your nature strategy. So we don't have businesses in this at the moment, so we're waiting for our strategy track crew to move on into this. And again, this is going to be very exciting because this is going to be action implementation as well, which is really, really important. And it's what it's really all about. So I guess just to let you know the different events that are coming up. So in our action track, we are going to have our second action track in-person session on the 20th of May. And that's for our members of the action track. We also will be having a workshop, the second workshop for our strategy track, and that's going to be in April in person as well. And for businesses that are in the action and strategy track, we also deliver an all-employee training webinar to anyone in their business. And the point of that is to get businesses to mainstream biodiversity within the business so that everyone is aware, and it's not just the sustainability people that are dealing with it. So just to build awareness from the bottom right up to the top about the dependencies that we have on nature. And in terms of the discovery track, so the next online webinar that we're going to have is on the 7th of May, and really look forward to you joining us at that. Again, if there's any questions that you have, say that maybe haven't been answered through this particular webinar, please do put it in the Q&A. But also when we are going through this discovery webinars, we really are just trying to signpost you to the different resources and explain the connections that your business may have with nature. We all businesses are dependent on and impact on nature to some extent. So I would just like to say gur míle maithagah agus míle buíochas, and if you want to follow us, you can see our information there for Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn. So please do follow us. And if you want to get in touch, you can see there the manager at Business for Biodiversity Ireland email as well.